somehow they pulled it off. Jirga is about to have its world premiere at the Sydney Film Festival, screening in the $60,000 competition for audacious, cutting-edge and courageous filmmaking. The drama, with a title that refers to an Afghan tribal council, is about a former Australian soldier, played by Smith, who returns to Afghanistan to make amends 3 years after accidentally killing a civilian during a raid. It shows a rarely seen side of the country, ordinary Afghans getting on with their lives in dangerous times. And outside the chaotic city of Jalalabad, the countryside is strikingly beautiful but as wild as a Mad Max wasteland. Gilmour, 42, is an unusual filmmaker. For one thing, he has worked as a paramedic for more than 20 years, turning up daily to emergencies in Sydney for most of that time. Jirga is his third film after the warm-hearted 2007 drama, Son of a Lion, which he made with the Pashtun people in northern Pakistan, and the 2012 documentary Paramedico, for which he volunteered with ambulance crews in 14 cities including Johannesburg, Mexico City and Lahore. He has also written 2 books about the making of those films. Shot in secret in Afghanistan, Sam Smith Wright and Cheryl M. Miskino starred in Jirga. Photo: Benjamin Gilmour. Born in Germany, Gilmour grew up in a religious family at Lane Cove on Sydney's lower North Shore. His father is an Anglican minister who taught languages at the private school Shore. As a student there, Gilmour rebelled against what he saw as its authoritarian culture. "I was always off writing poetry sitting in a tree somewhere," he says. "I was the library monitor, not the rugby player." Some filmmakers grow up immersed in screen culture. But Gilmour's parents considered television the devil's work, so it was banned from the household. They relented once when he was 16 or 17, renting a set for a week during the school holidays, then sending it back afterwards. Surrounded by religion, Gilmour took what he liked but preferred exploring spirituality to organized faith. When he finished school, Gilmour horrified his mother by using his savings from part-time work in nursing homes and psychogeriatric wards to head overseas. But rather than a holiday in Bali or an adventure in London or New York, he went to Calcutta to volunteer with Mother Teresa at her home for the dying and destitute. Then he traveled to Darjeeling to work at a clinic in a Buddhist monastery and taught English to a young holy man. Back home in Sydney, with one of Mother Teresa's nuns as a referee, he became an ambulance officer at 19. "You're helping people," he says of the appeal. "You have a job where people are pleased to see you. You could live dangerously. You live on the edge a little and learn fascinating things about the human body and skills that allow you to potentially turn life-threatening injuries and illnesses around." After Son of a Lion and Paramedico, Gilmour was partly inspired to make Jirga by the Pakistanis and Afghans he had met who were dealing with war on a daily basis yet still managed to be dignified, cultured and generous. And partly by the troubled Australian military veterans from various wars that he treated as a paramedic, good people struggling with drugs, alcohol, divorce and homelessness. He cut down one who tried to hang himself in his garage, sedated another, a double amputee, who was violently psychotic, 11,000 kilometers from Uruzgan, on the streets of Sydney. "The war is inescapable for a paramedic," he says. These former soldiers were so damaged and so broken, planning for the film went smoothly for a while. The script was written, Smith had been cast and the shoot was scheduled for Pakistan near the Khyber Pass, which was safer than Afghanistan. A Pakistani investor was putting up $100,000 and an Australian cinematographer and an English-Pakistani production designer were on the way. But then disaster. Upset with the politics in the script, the Pakistani authorities refused permission to film in the country. The investor dropped out. Gilmour was devastated. The sensible thing would have been to cut our losses and head home, he says. But, and this was a long shot, I thought, what if we could pull this off on the fly? The bold idea, if Smith was prepared to take the risk, was to shoot the film guerrilla style in Afghanistan. Go for authenticity. Get the country's wild, dangerous chaos on screen. Use the small sum of money they had, savings, screen Australia development funding, crowd-funded cash, and work with sympathetic Afghans. Smith was intrigued by Gilmour's proposition. He said, "We can either go home with nothing or you and I can go to Afghanistan and rewrite the film together, cast people from the street, and basically wing it," he says. I was up for it. Gilmour bought a compact camera at a Pakistan shopping mall and taught himself to use it. YouTube. Australian artist and filmmaker George Giddos, who runs an artist centre in Jalalabad, put him in touch with Afghans who could help. The duo arrived in Jalalabad the day after Australian aid worker Kerry Wilson, who had been staying at the same hotel, was kidnapped. She was held hostage for 4 months before being released. It was so-called fighting season, so Gilmour sought advice about when it was safe to film. When they ventured into the city, one of their cast carried a handgun for security. When word spread that they wanted to shoot in the mountains, the Afghan police and army offered to escort them for a fee. "The way I like to operate is keep it discreet, catch local rickshaws, dress like a local and cast locals," Gilmour says. Suddenly we were in a position where we were thundering through central Jalalabad under lights and sirens in a police convoy with these cowboy Afghan army guys on back with their AKs, wolf whistling on carrying on. That made me feel sick. The danger played on Smith's mind, especially when he fell ill. There were times when I'd go into his room and it was like Captain Willard from Apocalypse Now, Gilmour says. I was very concerned about him. Smith concedes it was a dark time. Shot in secret in Afghanistan, Sam Smith and Cheryl M. Miskino stud. Photo, Benjamin Gilmour. We were staying in a hotel where I had a door with a broken lock, he says. I was sleeping fully clothed with my passport in my pocket, knife in my hand under my pillow and waking up to gunshots and mortar blasts. I'd sit staring at the door with the knife, waiting for morning prayer, because I knew people would be up and about then. One day, the duo had to abandon plans to continue shooting in a cave after learning local militants had planted an improvised explosive device there overnight. Another time, Gilmour was spooked by a military drone hovering 5 meters above his head. In 2 months in Afghanistan, they filmed for roughly 20 days. Throughout, Gilmour was determined that Jirga would be a counter to what he calls Hollywood war porn. He believes movies such as Lone Survivor, American Sniper and Zero Dark 30 distort facts and create American heroes in a way that suits the U.S. agenda. Hollywood has always sold us the lie that we can shoot our way to a happy ending, Gilmour says. It's very rare there's a happy ending at the end of a war, certainly in the last 2 decades. Sam Smith and Benjamin Gilmour. Photo, Amirsha Talashes. He worked on the film back in Australia. Gilmour decided it was time to move out of the city and work part-time as a paramedic. He and Caspia relocated to the NSW North Coast with children Paloma, 8, Romeo, 5, and baby Bohem. I got the point where I was burnt out in Sydney, he says. I got to a tipping point. The violence, the night shifts, the drugs and alcohol affecting patients. It's exhausting work. 2 years on from the shoot, Gilmour admits that Smith's fears in Afghanistan were legitimate. I would not have been surprised if we'd have been dragged out of our hotel and shot, he says. But while praising the courage of Smith and the Afghans who worked on the film, Gilmour insists they were never reckless. "I think I'm more street-wise than that," he says. "There are a lot of transferable skills and knowledge from the paramedic world to this kind of filmmaking: situational awareness, being able to read people and read situations, having a really good instinct for when things are turning in the wrong direction. But even so, why risk so much for a film? I loathe the idea of returning to Australia with nothing in hand, then trying to explain that to my partner and kids," Gilmour says. "I think Sam felt the same thing. The more he talks, the more it's clear how much Jirga is fueled by the idealism he showed when he volunteered with Mother Teresa as a teenager." Director Benjamin Gilmour left, and actor Sam Smith while making Jirga in Afghanistan. "I haven't given up on the world," Gilmour says. "As terrible as the state of the world appears to be to most people, I'd like to think we have hope. And I've always believed that, if your intentions are noble, if you're working towards an important goal of social change or helping your fellow human, that you have an element of divine protection." He smiles. "Even my atheist friends are convinced I have a guardian angel." Jirga screens at Sydney Film Festival on June 8, 9 and 11. Benjamin Gilmour's book Cameras.